Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Zoe. Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
Hi.
So we always like to start with the easiest question we have.
Which is, Zoe, what did you eat for lunch today, or what are you planning to eat for lunch today?
Okay, so honestly, I start the day off with a really good cup of coffee. Okay, lunch today was going to be I had refrigerator oats.
Wow, yum.
This may be the least sexy lunch I could possibly have come up with, but to be perfectly honest, and they're kind of delicious. It's a recipe from a girlfriend of mine, and yeah, I kind of love them.
I mean, there's really no judgment here. Like, we're all a work in progress, you know?
And also, we like
That's
eating
hilarious.
breakfast for lunch, breakfast for dinner, breakfast at
Yeah.
breakfast.
Oh,
How can
yeah.
you go wrong?
No. There's no rules in this house. In fact, dinner for my children was usually pie, cake, or bread. So
What a dream life.
Yeah, what a dream.
So Zoe, you're a best-selling author with 10 cookbooks, which is so remarkable. We both want to really congratulate you on your new book,
Thank
Zoe
you.
Bakes Cookies. It's
Thank you.
really such a treasure for any home baker who doesn't love cookies. So this is just absolutely sort of a necessary thing to add to your collection if you are an avid cookie baker. And in the introduction of the book, you talk about the influence of your grandmothers on your baking.
Yeah.
One baked many Jewish classics, as did mine, and the other had an annual enviable Christmas cookie tin, which I know Carrie can
Yes.
relate to. How do you feel about these contrasting baking traditions and how they influenced you?
Yeah, I mean, I was so lucky to grow up with both traditions and didn't quite understand that everybody didn't have this until I was an adult. I would go from one grandmother's house to the other, and it was just a totally different culture of food. And I thought that was totally normal. And I've been completely influenced by both of them and feel really grateful for that. And the book too is so influenced by both of them and their grandmothers too. And I hadn't really anticipated that when I dove into this book, just how sort of powerful those family memories and recipes were going to be in this. I thought it was going to be a love letter to all of the cookies that I've had in my life and throughout my career. And it's very much that, but these women just shaped the whole thing in a way I hadn't actually anticipated.
That's really lovely and beautiful. And I think, you have this long history of baking cookies, and you had your own cookie cart when you were in college in Vermont. And, as home cooks, I'm wondering, what was your biggest baking lesson from those early years? And like, what was the most popular cookie on your cookie cart?
Okay, well, the biggest lesson was do not throw a pound of frozen butter into your mixer and turn it on high. Yeah, that was a hard lesson. I think I did that within the first week. I bought my KitchenAid mixer. It was the most expensive thing I'd ever purchased. It was my prize, and I threw this pound of frozen butter in there and just stripped the gears. I was 19. I carried that thing into the local distributor, and they fixed it. And not only did they fix it, but they put in a professional grade engine and told me never to do that again.
Wow, how
So
fortunate.
I've learned a
Yes.
lot. I've learned a lot since then, but that is my gift to you, uh, the advice of not doing it. The most popular cookie was by far chocolate chip, but every day it was a little bit different. I mean, these were the days of Mrs. Fields and Famous Amos, and so adding white chocolate and macadamia nuts was like exotic for the day. And so every day I would have like a slightly different spin on the chocolate chip, but that's always a classic. I mean, it's how come it ended up on the cover of the book, because everybody has a chocolate chip cookie that they love. I actually have several in the book because some people like them crispy, some people like them ooey and gooey and chewy. So everybody's different and there's something for everybody.
We definitely want to get back to chocolate chip cookies because actually, the very first episode we ever recorded was about chocolate chip cookies and all the little nuances. And I was obsessed with that section of your
Perfect.
book. So we're going to definitely circle back. It doesn't surprise me that was the most popular flavor. But
Yeah.
looking at your kitchen behind you, which your kitchen setup is pretty legendary from social media, specifically the rolling rack you have built under your island.
Yes.
While
Yes.
having built a speed rack in a kitchen is like total serious kitchen goals, like a dream. I definitely it's on my dream bucket list. But what do you think is actually an essential tool for every home baker? Like, what do you think everyone absolutely needs to have? And maybe what's totally overrated and unnecessary?
Yeah. Okay. So the tool that I would say is most necessary is a scale, a kitchen scale. I love to bake with weights, and I'm sort of on this crusade to get all American bakers to bake with weights just because I find it easier. I find it makes your baking more consistent. Uh, just everything about it makes sense for baking. So I would say the kitchen scale is my all-time favorite. The thing that's okay, you have to understand this about me. I love kitchen equipment. So I don't know that I've met a piece of equipment that I haven't purchased. So I love them all. Yeah, it's a bit of a thing. Um, what is overrated? I don't even know. I mean, they each of them serve their own purpose. Now, having said that, you don't have to have a lot, especially with cookies. I mean, I grew up making cookies in a bowl and a wooden spoon, and that's it. So as long as you've got the temperature of your ingredients just right, you can really get in there with a wooden spoon and mix these things up. I love my stand mixer because it does the work for me, but you don't absolutely have to have it.
I think that's really comforting to know.
Yeah, I think, Sonia and I are much more minimalist in the kitchen with our
Yeah.
equipment, but I think
I don't know.
I
I think I'm a maximalist and you're a minimalist, but
right.
Okay.
But I agree with you on the scale, and I find that the
Yeah.
scale is useful for many, many things, even beyond baking. So, and it's really like 20 bucks maybe at the most to get
Yeah, I
a
mean,
good kitchen
there's
scale.
a range of them, but for sure, you do not have to invest a ton of money to get great results.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to make a quick pivot over to holiday cookies and, putting together an essential holiday cookie tin.
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
wondering, what do you think are like when you think about putting together your tin, your collection of cookies that you offer to people, what are the components? Like, do you have a framework that you think about?
Well, okay, so one thing is that while you were talking, I was thinking of my granny Neil, because like this was her wheelhouse. This was her superpower, was putting together these tins. And she always had, and I think this is essential for any baking, she always had a mix of flavors, textures, visuals. There were layered bars. She was Midwestern. She came from Michigan. So bars were part of her repertoire, even though we didn't call them that when I was a kid. She always had shortbread. Shortbread was like, you know, the queen of cookies in her tin. There was always, of course, a sugar cookie, little things. It also depended, like we were coming to her, and so she would bake things fresh. She wasn't necessarily sending these things. So there were things in there that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for shipping, like meringues and things like that, because they wouldn't probably land as well as some of the other cookies. But I would say that flavors, so that you have, the spices of cardamom and plus a little bit of chocolate, so that there's a little bit of something for everybody.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, and it's so exciting to open a tin and see that variety and see what each baker is excited to make, because it everyone has their
Yeah.
signature. Uh, Having said that, though, is there something like in your book, you mentioned changing up your holiday cookie lineup every year and mixing it up,
Yep.
but is there ever a
Yep.
variety that's just a must-have that either your family or your friends or for yourself, you're like, "It's not the holiday season without this thing?"
Yeah, I would say the shortbread. And I think that comes from nostalgia for me, because those were the things that they were my aunt's favorites, and so my grandmother would make them every year. And so for me, that represents the holidays. And so those for sure, her coconut maple layered bars are a must. I mean, I don't think it's really a holiday if I don't have them, especially for my dad. And so each person kind of has their favorites. My husband's absolute favorite cookie is a Madeleine, which is,
Wow.
so I have, certain Madeleines that I make around the holidays, a chocolate Madeleine for him. So each person has like their own favorites that I cater to, but I'm always experimenting and always, wanting to change things up. So for my own entertainment, I tend to throw new things in there as well.
So you mentioned that you were always going to visit your Granny Neal, and so she was making the cookies fresh. I'm curious if you and you also mentioned that like, shipping a meringue is not a great idea. And so I wonder if you can offer any tips on if you're going to ship cookies to someone, or even if you're just going to take them like like if you
Mm.
were leaving your Granny Neal's and you wanted to take cookies home with you, like you would eat the meringues first, but then what would you take with you on the car ride?
Yeah, I mean, things that ship really well are things like biscotti and shortbread and um, things that are maybe drier, and they're going to last longer, like those things that I just mentioned. Things that are sort of ooey gooey, it kind of depends how far you're shipping them. And what I always do whenever I'm shipping or making a tin that's going to be shipped is I bag them up in like those cellophane bags, and do like a decorative tie or twist, and separate them so that if something has a little bit of moisture to it, it's not going to affect the other cookies in the tin. So if you just put them in like paper, they're going to play with each other in the shipping. And so, and also by bagging them in these cellophane bags, you're also preventing them from moving around. So things like if you've decorated a sugar cookie, you want to make sure that that is staying still and isn't moving around a lot, or you might lose some of the decoration. So yeah, those are the kinds of things. Just make sure that they're packed really, really tightly and that they're not going to move around, and keep the different kinds of cookies separate.
That's so helpful to know. And just as a kind of follow up to that, I noticed in the book you mentioned this technique for shipping with ice packs or freezing your cookies in advance and then
Yes.
shipping them with ice
Yes.
packs, which was very new to me because I'm always Carrie freezes cookies and actually likes eating cookies frozen, which is a place we
That's
disagree
amazing.
on, but
Yeah.
I only freeze things unbaked. I don't tend to
Yes.
freeze my cookies baked. Are there, like, cookies that freeze really well that are perfect for holiday gifting?
Okay, so this is something that my grandmother would do. She would bake them fresh, but she would freeze the dough so that because she would make at least a dozen different types of cookies. So she
Wow.
couldn't be mixing and baking all the day that we arrived. So it's not only a trick that I learned from her, but also in professional kitchens is to have dough at the ready in the freezer. I'm with you. I like to freeze the dough and bake a cookie fresh, and then ship it. If you are shipping, like right now in Minnesota, we don't need to freeze anything because the second it leaves the house, it freezes. So we have this great outdoor freezer at our disposal. But like I just sent my aunt a tin of cookies that's headed to Florida. And so I baked the cookies, froze the cookies, did exactly what I described to you. I put them in the cellophane wrappers and then in a tin so they wouldn't move around. And I shipped it overnight. And um, she hasn't gotten them yet. So, because I just sent them yesterday, but I'm pretty sure they're going to arrive just fine. But they're going to arrive in a warm climate. And so I'm just trying to give them a leg up by freezing them first. It's something I discovered when I was shipping things to my boys when they were in college, care packages, that if I froze everything and shipped it overnight, they would show up and be totally intact and ready to go.
Wow,
And they
how
would always eat
brilliant.
them within minutes, so it didn't really matter anyway.
I wouldn't wait. If I received a cookie tin from you, I would eat them all immediately as well.
Well, when
Um,
they land with my boys, there's usually a half dozen or more other friends around, so they don't last long.
yeah, they know who's shipping those cookies. Zoe, I'm curious, do you have a gluten-free cookie that you recommend at the holidays?
Yeah, I do. I do quite a few. Obviously, meringues are gluten free. The coconut haystacks, macarons are gluten free. There's a lot of cookies that are just naturally gluten free. The crisp chocolate chip cookie, it's not written for gluten free, but if you substitute gluten free flour, it's terrific. And in fact, I might even prefer it
Wow.
because it just bakes up really crispy and beautifully. So I have done lots and lots of the cookies with gluten-free flour with just absolute success to them. So some are naturally gluten-free and some adapt really well.
I love how you talk about, everyone has a different preference of cookie, and so you're making some over again, but you personally like to try new things, right? And new
Yeah.
recipes. And is there something that's like a cookie that's really excited you or surprised you in recent years, a new kind of cookie or one that you're trying out this year for the first time?
Well, all kinds of cookies. I'm sort of like tweaking them and experimenting with them. There's uh, we're doing. I've been lucky enough to have multiple printings of the book already, and I'm actually
Wow.
adding a cookie to it that I just made. That is a farfel cookie.
Really?
Which, okay, so farfel for people that don't know is broken up matzah, and it's so crazy, but it's like you make a caramel with the farfel, and then I cover it with a layer of marshmallow and then this chocolate glaze on it. So it's almost like a Malamar bar. Do you know what
Oh
I'm
my god.
talking about?
Well, first of all, it's like the, matzo caramel, and
Yeah,
you have one in your
yeah,
book. It's like
yeah.
that at the next level.
It's next
It's
level up. I leveled it up. And this is exactly what happens is that I have this thing and then I start playing with it. And then I loved it so much that it's going to go in one of the next printings.
That's
So yeah, so
incredible.
this is exactly what happens.
Wow. I'm so fascinated. I feel like baking is such a space of science and measurements
Mm.
but I just hear you talking about how you experiment so much with your cookies and you're always tweaking them. And so I'm curious, like where do you get your inspiration to do that? Or like what is sort of driving you to constantly be iterating on your cookies?
So, okay, so there's two things about what you just said. I think people get so hung up and intimidated by baking and the science behind it. And so there are like a few things that if you understand them, it really frees you up to play. And that's why I always put a baking academy at the front of the book, because anybody that wants to sort of like know how things go together or what's going to happen if you change a recipe a little bit will have that information, not only for the recipes in my book, but also if you have like your grandmother's recipe and you just can't make it the way you remember it, this information will help you. But just having like basics will really free you up to play. And that's the exciting part for me, is that people would take my recipes and add their own spin to it. And then they have to come to social media and tell me what they did so that I can try it. Um, the community inspires me a lot. So social media has changed everything because I have that like instant communication with my readers. Whereas when I first started writing cookbooks, I would put a book out there and I wouldn't know if anybody was making it. But now people post on social media and they tell me what they've tried, and I get equally as inspired by them as hopefully they do by the books. So a lot of that happens. And also with my peers, we do a lot of, sharing and seeing incredible things on Instagram and all over, and cookbooks. I have hundreds of cookbooks. Or just the grocery store. I am just everything inspired
You're
to
not
bake.
alone in
So,
saying that. We've had a couple of
yeah.
guests who've said that, and I think we both feel that way too, and it's a perfect segue to our next question, which is, in the cookie space, specifically, what other bakers or cookbooks do you really admire?
Oh, it's so endless. I mean, Dory Greenspan is one of my idols, mentors, friends. And she just does absolutely beautiful work. And she's a beautiful human. And Sarah Kiefer is another friend who does very, very different things. I mean, that's the thing about all of these cookbooks, is that we're all writing about cookies, but they come to us and we bring to it our experience and our family and our culture to it. So each one is different. And I learned something from all of them. There, Rose Levy Birnbaum, and, there's so many, Nancy Silverton. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's so many bakers, Claudia Fleming. How long do you have?
We have all
It's
day
like,
because
yeah,
we
the
we
list
love all
is,
we love all these bakers that you're mentioning. I mean, that Dory Greenspan cookie book is also another one of my favorite baking books.
yeah. I mean, she is just, she's a total gem, and just brilliant. Her writing, her recipes, she sets the bar so high in terms of quality and recipe testing and making sure things work, and that the way she writes a recipe communicates in a way that encourages people to bake. And I really find that that's a lot of the important part of writing a cookbook, is inviting people into it and encouraging them and sharing the joy that we feel from it. So
Yeah, Zoe, I appreciate that you listed so many incredible cooks because we are a community of home cooks. We are interested in the home cooking
yeah,
space, and I think that's a place where home cooks can connect with each other is through cookbooks. But I
yeah.
want to take us back to cookies and out of the holiday cookie space and into a cookie that I noticed in your book called morning cookies,
Oh
which
yeah.
I will say, as a personal chef, I was given a recipe for what was called a breakfast cookie.
Okay.
And so I was wondering if you could just describe your morning cookie.
Yes.
And in the description, you also give this permission to like put this in your kid's lunchbox, which like I love to do. And also, you said you put it in your gym bag. But I have to know, is that really true? Do you really put this morning cookie in your gym bag?
It is true if I've made them. Yes, if I have them on hand, I absolutely do. Partly because I do have a personal trainer, and he described the perfect snack to eat before a workout, and it is essentially that cookie. So
Wow.
it is no
Cool.
joke
What
that
an
I do.
endorsement.
Yeah, because he was saying, because I always thought you were supposed to do like protein. He said you want to have something that's got some carbohydrates and gives you energy. This cookie is actually perfect. So, yes, I do it.
Okay, so
I don't always have them on hand.
will you
Okay, so
tell our
this,
listeners what's in the
yeah.
cookie?
Okay, I have to read the ingredients because I don't have it memorized. Is that
No, no, it's great.
That's
Yeah.
okay,
okay?
great.
Okay, let's see. I've got it right here. Okay, so this cookie comes from my Vermont commune chapter. So you have to kind of understand the background for this. I grew up on a commune in Vermont. No sugar. Well, I shouldn't say that. The sugar that we had was maple sugar because we tapped the trees, or honey because my dad kept bees. And so anything that we produced as sugar were allowed. But I didn't even know refined sugar was out there until I went to school. My parents told me that raisins were candy and that carob was chocolate. It is not. Um, we are, we've gone through a lot of therapy over it, and we are in a good place. But it was a total lie. Okay, so the morning cookies are rolled oats, whole wheat flour, unsweetened coconut, carob. Don't tell my dad that I actually put carob in the book after I complained about it so much. You can use chocolate if you're just completely opposed to it. Nuts, pepitas, or pumpkin seeds. See, these are all super healthy
Yeah.
things. Craisins and currants, mashed bananas. This is something you would completely give to your kids in the morning. And then honey and a little bit of coconut oil. So
Yum.
they really are healthy, and they're delicious. See, that's what was missing from my childhood, is all the food uh, was very healthy but lacking in delicious. And so a lot of these things are based on memories that I had, but I've chefed them up a little bit and made them what I want to eat.
And I had to laugh because I had a friend who grew up similarly without sugar, and his mother convinced him that mashed up tofu was ice cream, which I think
No.
is the
No, that's
cruelest.
next level. That is next that is not acceptable.
There's
It's
not enough
really
Yeah,
not.
therapy
There's
for
not enough.
that.
Exactly. No, I
that's
love this.
hilarious.
I actually
Yeah.
love carob, and so and I
Yeah,
grew up
I do
eating
too
carob in,
now.
like, Jewish school, like, I don't it was always
Yeah,
there for certain
so
holidays, so
wild.
anyway, I'm
Okay, so
excited
the
to try
crazy
this.
thing is I did the same thing to my boys. They didn't have sugar until they were older. So I complained about this so much, but it was obviously formative, and I felt the need to exercise that pain to my own children. So,
So going
oh,
into the full sugar direction and
yeah.
returning to chocolate chip cookies, which we already mentioned is something we're both obsessed with. I personally spent 10 years developing my own recipe and for my restaurant. So I was just so thrilled. In your book, you really break down every single ingredient in a cookie and show how if you increase it or decrease it, what it does to the cookie. I just feel like it's a must read for anyone who cares about chocolate chip cookies.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's so fun. But having said that, what do you think is like the biggest pitfall for home bakers? Like a lot of home bakers I hear like struggle with achieving that crispy on the outside, chewy
Mm.
cookie. Like their cookies are too cakey or too fluffy or too hard. What do you think is the thing that that one thing they could do to get a better cookie?
Okay, well, we've already touched on the scale. So that is maybe the most important thing. But I would say, too, is always read the front of a cookbook because a cookbook author often will tell you like how they measure things or what kind of flour they're using because if the author uses like a gold medal flour versus a King Arthur, those two types of flour have different amounts of protein, which creates the gluten. And so your cookies will come out differently depending on the flour that you use.
Huh.
I would say the number one tip that I always give people is to read the recipe start to finish before you start it, mostly so that you make sure that the ingredients are the right temperature because things will go together much more easily. The texture of them will be different depending on what the recipe is calling for. So those things. The other thing is that it's so personal what people want in a cookie. Like what I like in a cookie and what my husband likes in a cookie are totally different things. And so I wanted to give people permission, or not just permission, but encourage them to make the cookies their own. But people get lost once they start substituting things, and they really go off the recipe, and then things don't necessarily turn out the way that they wanted. So I wanted to put some experiments on the page so that they could see if you add more sugar or less sugar, this is what will happen to your cookie. If you add more leavener, like baking soda, this is what will happen. To sort of guide people through that substitution and playing with the recipe.
Can I ask too? I noticed your cookie recipe doesn't have baking powder, which is something I actually do include in my chocolate chip cookies. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering why you exclude it, why it's unnecessary.
Well, it just depends. Some of them have it and some of them don't. Part of what I always do in the cookbooks is give a variety of recipes so that the techniques are different, the list of ingredients are different, so that you can kind of see what the different ingredients do. And so some of the cookies do have baking powder. Baking soda is a much more intense leavener. So things tend to puff up and then collapse because you'll get a really big air bubble with a baking soda, and the baking powder is not quite as intense. But you can't use as much baking soda, or you'll get that almost soapy taste to
Yeah.
it. And so you have to know also, baking soda interacts with acid in a recipe. So these are all things that I put in the Baking Academy. And if you want to know these little things, they're there. And if you want to ignore them, you can completely ignore them and just go straight to the recipe. But I find this stuff fascinating. I find it endlessly entertaining. And I could go on and on about it. In fact, I did a Zoom and my mom, and I was talking about the book and the cookies. And my mom called me after and said, "You are such a geek." And I mean, she meant it lovingly. But I am, and I love that stuff. So it's there if you want it.
Zoe, as one of the queens, the foremost queens of cookies, I just think it's so incredibly generous that you really try to empower the people who read your cookbooks with the information that you have that you really care about and that you understand. And I also love that as a queen of cookies, you're not saying there's one definitive cookie for everyone, that you're asking people to look inside and say, what is the cookie for me? And you're telling them how
Yeah.
to get that. So for our final question, I just want to ask, what does the queen of cookies eat for her birthday? Do you eat cookies,
Oh.
or is there a special treat that you have for your birthday?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so for me, a birthday cake is really a special thing. And I always bake my own. I think my boys and my husband have baked me a couple of cakes over the years. But it's a tradition that I always bake my own cake, and it's always different. There's never like a set, um, go to every year, because it's whatever's inspired me in the minute or whatever I'm in the mood for. But for me, birthdays are really about cake.
I
So
love
yeah,
that. You're
yeah.
also not the
Uh,
first person we've interviewed who said they bake their own birthday cake.
oh no, I know that this is a thing amongst bakers, that we all bake our own cake. Yeah. Yeah.
Love
And
it.
I have to say also that when people bake for us, we love it because very, very rarely does it happen. And I have to tell you that when somebody bakes for me, I am over the moon.
That's so
Yeah, we would agree with that as well. As chefs, I think people are not often don't often want to invite us to their house, but when we get invited to someone's house, eating
Yeah,
dinner, it's such a personal thing eating at someone's house, and we very much appreciate it. So
it's so lovely.
I'll
It's
speak
such
for
a
both of us.
gesture. Yeah, I mean, and
yeah.
we do this because we love it and we love to feed people, and it makes us happy for other people to eat. And we are equally as happy to eat something somebody else has taken the time and care to make.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. And we just really want to thank you for your time today. We encourage people to find your cookbook, Zoe Bakes Cookies. Let our listeners know how best they can find you online.
Zoe Bakes on Instagram, my website, and Substack,
Great.
and YouTube, all of them, Zoe Bakes. Thank
Well,
you so much. This was such a joy.
thank you, Zoe. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Happy holidays. Happy
Yeah, to you
baking.
too.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.